From our 22 News Broadcast Center, this is 22 News in Focus.
Good Sunday afternoon and welcome to 22 News in Focus. I'm Laura Hutchinson. Today is the third anniversary of the June 1st, 2011 tornado that left 3 dead and devastated many communities here in western Massachusetts. A lot has happened in the 3 years and a lot still has to be done. That's where 22 News in Focus comes in. Today we have representatives from a couple of those communities to talk about the continuing rebuilding efforts. We'll also talk with an emergency preparedness director about how to make a plan for your family or business should a disaster strike. But first today we want to update you on a story 22 News has been following for several months: cuts and restructuring at military bases across the country. We recently learned that it will impact Westover Air Reserve Base in Chicopee, and today we have a representative from the governor's task force that's working to get the bases to run more efficiently as well. So we will talk to him. But first we begin today with the commander of Westover Air Reserve Base, Brigadier General Stephen Vautrain. We want to thank you so much for being here. Now,
Laura, it's good to be here.
Thanks for coming on the program. Now, since this announcement happened more than a month ago, it sounds like that the cuts were coming. A lot has happened. I know the mayor of Chicopee traveled down to D.C. There's been just some talks about how we're going to sort of handle this. Do you think that these cuts actually are going to happen? I know that this is something that is sort of going to happen down the road. Is there any stopping this?
Well, it's what we call the program of record right now, so that's the way the Air Force is proceeding, and that's the way the Reserve is proceeding. We appreciate the efforts that the legislature, Mayor Koss, and the governor are doing to help us out. I'm not sure if there's going to be any effect, but we need to continue through with the plan as it's supposed to happen.
Okay, so let's go through this again. The number of jobs that are going to be cut or positions, and how that sort of weighs out with people who might be placed into another spot as well. So what does the employment look like? Well,
primarily it's the loss of the 8 airplanes. We have 16 C-5s. We're going to 8 C-5s. And along with that, we lose personnel to support those. It'll be 59 full-time positions and 275 part-time positions. And those are the positions, not necessarily the people. So for the 59 full-time, we should be able to absorb that through vacancies and retraining and retirements, things like that. So hopefully we won't have anyone that's their full-time job will be lost. The reservists is going to be a little more difficult because 275 positions is a lot. So we'll try to keep as many as we can through retraining, vacancies, and all that. But we'll also work with the units in surrounding states to try to find jobs for them. We are talking to Barnes, we're talking to Otis, we're talking to Connecticut, to the folks down there at Bradley, to see if we can place them someplace nearby so they can still commute. But we probably will have some folks and unfortunately won't be able to find positions for.
Now, do the people who are directly affected by this, do they know who they are now?
No, we don't know yet. When we made the first announcement, when it came out in late April and I had my press conference, we told everyone that we've been informed it would be 30 days before we got our unit manning document, and that's the one that actually lists the positions and the programming plan, and that would actually be the set schedule of how things are going to happen. There's a lot going on in the Air Force right now, so we've passed that 30 days and we haven't seen it yet. Hopefully we'll see it soon, and as soon as we get the UMD, the Manning document, we'll be able to identify the positions and start working with the people.
So explain again why this is happening and why it impacts Westover in particular.
Well, it's partly due to sequestration, or really the Budget Control Act that was passed back in 2011, $487 billion over 10 years. So those are cuts that are causing ripples across the entire military, not just the Air Force. But in the Air Force, they're having to downsize. And the number of C-5s is being downsized. There were 130 of them built. We were down to 79 C-5s in the inventory. Now we're going to 52. And with only 52 airplanes left, then it gets more difficult to place them. So they'll end up with 18 at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware, 18 at Travis Air Force Base in California, 8 at Westover, and 8 at Lackland in Texas.
Okay, so the planes that are leaving Westover are being placed in other locations, is that right?
Yes, the old ones, the C-5A models, were built back in the 60s, and they're all being retired. So the only ones left will be B models, which were built in the 80s that are being converted to M models. So there'll be 52 M models left. Lackland had 16 A models. So all of theirs are being retired, so they'd end up with 0 airplanes, and the decision was made to take 8 of the airplanes from Westover and give them to Lackland so that each base would have 8 aircraft.
And is it still going to work as efficiently, you know, because I know Massachusetts is unique as to where we're located and where some of the missions take us. Will it be just as efficient to have those planes in those different locations? I understand that they had C-5s and this is just sort of replacing it for them. But are we going to lose anything, you know, from the national
We shouldn't
defense?
lose too much capability. The C-5M is more reliable than the C-5B because it has a lot of upgrades that are done to it. With the increase in reliability, supposedly 8 airplanes will be able to fly as many missions as 16 did. I'm not really sure if that will carry out, but that's the plan, that we should be able to continue with as many missions as we have now. That's why most of the cuts are in maintenance, because they're the ones that maintain the airplanes and not in operations. In operations, we're actually keeping the same number of crews, pilots, flight engineers, load masters that we have now.
Now, it's hard for us to understand, those of us who are not directly involved in this process or work in the military, for us to understand how devastating of an impact this is, if it is at all. So when you heard these figures and these numbers and what was happening, what was your reaction to that personally? Is this a big change, or is this something?
It is devastating, and to me, I'm the wing commander. I'm responsible for the wing and the people, and to learn that we're losing 50% of our airplanes and about 13% of our personnel is a hard hit to take as a commander. But we need to do what we have to do to be able to maintain a strong Air Force overall. So we realize that we're a small part of that. There are also other units that are being cut out completely and being closed. So at least we'll still be here out at Westover and we'll still be doing the mission. So we'll still be a part of Western Massachusetts and we'll still contribute to the economy. We just won't be quite as big as we were before. But we do have a very relevant mission. We'll be able to continue supporting humanitarian missions and combat missions. We'll just have less airplanes, less people. And like I said, our goal is really to make sure that we can keep as many people in the reserve as we can, because we are one of the only reserve units up in the Northeast. The next nearest place for a Air Force reservist to do their duty is in McGuire Air Force Base in New Jersey.
Okay.
Niagara Air Force Base up in New York is the next closest. So we have all these people that live in this area that are serving their country. Most of them served on active duty, got off active duty, came into the reserve, and now they have civilian jobs. They're doctors, lawyers, mechanics, firemen, policemen, you name it, we have them all. And they also choose to serve their country in the reserve. So our goal is to try to keep as many of them as possible.
And what are your thoughts about what's ahead and what the future holds right now? Rarely do you see, you know, companies backstep and then you get all these people back again. Do you have any concerns about sort of where this is going? I understand that there are cuts to bases across the country, but we're obviously particularly concerned about our own bases in Western Mass. Do you have any concerns about the future?
Not too much. Westover has been an example of how to set up a reserve base, that it's not just the 439th Airlift Wing out there. We also have Army Reservist, Marine Reservist, and Navy Reservist as well. And that was a result of the BRAC of 2005 that brought those people into Westover. So it's an excellent example of how to put the reserve units together, and it's a lot cheaper to run a reserve base than it is an active duty base. So we're there, we have a skeleton manning, you know, keeping the base going, keeping our people trained and ready. If something should happen, those reservists can be called to active duty and sent off to go do whatever the country needs them to do. Then they can come back, go back into the community. So it's a very good setup, and I think that's a good future plan. I think Westover is set up very well for the future.
And what is next? When do you, I know you were hoping to get that plan 30 days out. What is next for you? I guess it is to get that, and then how does this sort of start implementing? What do you know about how this is going to work?
Well, once we get the plan, then we identify the positions, and we can identify, you know, hopefully some of them will already be vacant. Those are the easy ones to get rid of, and we just take them off the books. When there's a position that will go away that has a person in it, then we try to find a place to move that person to, and we start working that, and that's when we actually do the movements, retraining, whatever is required. Part of that is contacting other units and finding out, you know, like, well, we have a jet mechanic, we're losing his position, we don't have one here, is there one available at Barnes, is there one available at Bradley, is there one available at, you know, up in Vermont, somewhere like that. And we'll start working that. We'll have to work it individually for the people. And something that also helps with the plan are people that leave already. Because as soon as something like this comes out, if you were looking at the possibility of moving to another unit, then this makes a decision very easy to say, well, I could stick around at Westover, wait till it happens, or I can take the bird in the hand and go take that job. And we've already had a few of those. So we're starting to work it already, but until we actually have the union manning document in hand and the programming plan, we can't really kick it off.
Okay, well, all the best, and we'll be watching this closely, of course. General Vautrin, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about this. I appreciate it.
Yep, thank you, Laura.
Thank you so much. And we will have more on the developments at Westover. We're actually going to talk to somebody from the governor's task force after this. We'll explain what that is. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. We were just discussing the proposed cuts to Westover Air Reserve Base and bases across the country. We were talking to the Commander General at the base about how they're responding. Later on in the program, we'll be talking about the ongoing rebuilding efforts on the 3-year anniversary of the June 1st, 2011 tornado. But first, let's talk to a member of the governor's task force about a meeting they had in Western Mass this week and their goal for the military bases. Joining me now, we have Lieutenant Colonel Thatcher Keyser of the Massachusetts Air National Guard and a member of this task force that we're talking about. So thank you so much for being on. I appreciate that.
Thank you for having me.
We were just talking to General Vautrin just about how they're sort of preparing for what's going on at the base there. My understanding is the task force can't stop what's happening, but you are sort of working with the bases. Explain exactly what the task force is for us.
Well, the task force, which is really an innovative idea for Massachusetts to build collaborations and bring stakeholders together in order to address these type of issues that are going to come up and continue to come up as we fight budget cycles and so forth. So Governor Patrick created a task force. It has 3 co-chairs, the governor, former U.S. Senator Mo Cowan, and Congresswoman Nikki Tsongas, who also serves on the military Appropriations Committee down in Congress. So they co-chair it, and then there's other folks that are on the executive committee, which include Major General Rice, who's the Adjutant General of Massachusetts, who's my boss and who I represent in these roles on the task force. And the whole idea is to bring together folks at the local government level, state level, federal level, bring in universities, bring in private sector, bring in all these stakeholders in with the military installations that we have in Massachusetts to build collaborations to increase value of our military installations. And what I mean by increased value is drive down costs, do certain investments that make the running of these installations cheaper, add productivity, do workforce training to help build up the workforce around it, so that ultimately we get to the point that when the Department of Defense starts making decisions about moving units around or adding units to different locations or taking away, they look at Massachusetts and look at us as a very high value state in which to locate new missions or to protect the ones that we have, so that we can put off any of these changes and keep the high value activity that's going on with the military installations, with the industries that are around it, with the communities that are surrounding these installations.
Okay, so making Westover and Barnes and all the other bases just look like you don't want to touch these if you're going to touch a base. Is that sort of what it is? At least trying
that's
to,
exactly. Okay. It's a no-brainer that Massachusetts is where we want to keep the missions we have and even add new missions as they become available.
Okay. Now, I know you've been holding meetings with the task force around the state. You had one in Springfield last week. Yeah. So what are these meetings all about? What's the purpose of this?
Well, part of it is to inform the communities around these military installations, to bring people in on board, to build the collaboration that we have. And again, we want to work with the local municipal officials. We want to work with the legislative delegation from the State House that represent these areas, congressional delegation. But we're also bringing in the chambers of commerce, the businesses, the universities, the public universities, get them involved in these efforts. So the first part is to let folks know what we're doing, what we're trying to achieve, and get people to the table, around the table, and providing input and guidance on how we can increase the value of all these military installations.
So what are you hearing about or from the people living near Barnes or living near Westover? What are you hearing so far? What are you seeing? What are sort of the possibilities that you're expecting to be able to implement sometime in the future? Any kind of examples?
Well, I think the first blush is there's a lot of veterans who want to maintain the legacy that we have here in Massachusetts of the military installations we have and the great missions that they've achieved and what they've done for our country. But then also it is the impact on jobs in the area, because the military installations bring jobs, and not just military jobs, not just jobs that are directly supporting the military missions, but those that support those industries. So it really is, it is about maintaining jobs in Massachusetts, and where we have a very good cluster of high-tech industries, a lot of intellectual industries here in Massachusetts, and they tie well in with the needs of the military. So we want to maintain that cluster here in Massachusetts.
Do you think there are some deficiencies at Westover or at Barnes that need to be looked at to make things run a little bit smoother? Well,
what we're trying to look at on all the installations is, can we make them more energy efficient? Can we bring the cost down of running them? That's one. Another one is looking at, is there excess capacity on these military installations in which we can bring in private industry and sort of develop the economies of scale of sharing the resources that we have, sharing the utilities, sharing the infrastructure, which again brings down the cost, but it also helps bring jobs in. And part of the effort of the military task force is the legislature has approved the $177 million bond authorization, which provides a funding source so that we can partner, so the state can partner to do an investment along with the local community, along with the military, along with the federal government. So where there is a need to do an enhancement or fixing up a facility in order to modernize it and bring it online, there are those funds that are available. And again, by design, it's meant not to be the sole source or to supplement or supplant other sources, but to be a contribution that brings in other funds. A recent example is at Barnes is the runway improvements, in which the local city, the state government, and the task force funding, as well as other sources, were combined in order to provide the funding in order to get that done. And so those are the examples of what that seed money will do. And bringing the people around the table, the collaboration, will help define what those needs are and prioritize the needs, because we're not going to be able to meet all of them, but the ones that have the most impact to achieve the objectives of the task force.
Now, was that example at Barnes, was that the task force?
Yes.
Okay.
It was a part
so you
of
identified
that
and, okay.
Yes.
So have you started to identify anything at Westover that might be?
We're very early in the process.
Okay.
So right now it's a matter of identifying what those are, vetting out the value of those, and prioritizing. So there's still work to be done in order to make sure we target the dollars where they have the most impact.
Okay. Do you think that there is any slowing this down of what's happening right now? We were just hearing about how we're losing planes and they're going to be, losing positions, possibly the personnel. Is there any slowing that down with your efforts right now, or do you think this is more for future decisions?
Well, we're all in the fight to slow down or stop any of the cuts that may be coming. We know we have the congressional delegation involved in this. There have been meetings locally as well as down in Washington to address these issues. The success of that we'll see. There's another year and a half before these are implemented. So we're hopeful in that time that there's an opportunity to have an impact on this decision locally, as well as any of the other Department of Defense decisions with all our military installations.
So how can people help or get involved? What is the best thing that people can do to sort of be a part of this process?
Well, we're reaching out. Again, what we're identifying are the key stakeholders for us. For the general public is to be aware of our efforts when they're talking with their local legislators, to show support for it. And so the best way is to help us is just let it be known, show general support. This will benefit, the work that's being done will benefit the citizens of Massachusetts, and hopefully there'll be a lot of good news stories coming out of the effort from this task force.
Excellent. And do you have meetings in Western Mass coming up once again? I know we just had one in Springfield. Is there anyone in the future planned?
So right now we're doing one round with the 6 installations we're involved with. So we've hit the ones out here. The next one Monday is down on Cape Cod.
Okay.
But that's just the first round. So there will be continuing conversations. There'll be more public meetings, a lot of stakeholder meetings that'll be going on as this task force moves forward.
Okay, Lieutenant Colonel Keyser, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about it. It's so interesting, and I'm sure people would like to just hear what's happening at these meetings, what it's all about, and so they can look forward when it comes around again. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. And today is, of course, the 3-year anniversary of the tornado that hit Western Massachusetts. After the break, we'll talk about progress and recovery 3 years later. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Today we've been talking about the issues at Westover Air Reserve Base, the cuts that are coming, but now we would like to turn to an important event that of course affected all of Western Massachusetts. On this day 3 years ago, June 1st, 2011, a tornado tore a 40-mile trail of destruction and killed 3 people. That same year, we were also hit by Tropical Storm Irene and a snowstorm in October that left thousands of people across the region without power for weeks. Many people lost their homes and businesses that year, and that's where 22 News in Focus comes in today. This is the 3rd anniversary of the tornado, and we'll be discussing the progress of rebuilding and how municipalities are preparing their communities for natural disaster preparedness as well. The town of Brimfield was one of those communities that saw extensive damage, and here to talk to us about the recovery in Brimfield, we have Richard Morris, the Emergency Management Director for Brimfield. Dick, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now, you were just telling me off air you sort of became director on June 1st, 2011.
Right.
That must have been an overwhelming day for you and the community. Can you believe it's been 3 years?
No, I can't. But I was fortunate to have a lot of help, and help from sources I didn't anticipate.
Really? Like
Yes.
other neighbors or who?
Well, we started with the town hall, the selectmen, getting approval from the state to go with a private contractor who took over the job of debris removal from the roads on a contract basis. So we didn't have the issues that other towns did of having to, we still had to count every load and so forth, but their objective was the same as ours. They had to get everything out of town.
Right.
They had no reason to cheat
Right.
in any way.
Sure.
And emergency management took over the job of monitoring the process. Between the two, we saved a lot of money. And one of my first surprises was the day the contractor arrived, which was shortly after the tornado. 2 people from FEMA arrived to hold our hands, teach me what I was supposed to do, what I was not supposed to do,
Yeah.
how to do it, what forms they needed, the whole thing. MEMA, Mass Emergency Management, was there with equipment that we needed. And I guess my expectations from FEMA were far lower than what I saw. In fact, they were far exceeded
Right.
what actually happened.
Right. Nice people
They
who are
did,
easy to work
yes.
with.
What actually happened far exceeded my expectations.
That's great. That's really nice to hear.
And we had a lot of volunteers in town.
So how is Brimfield doing? I guess when you look at maybe even just the 1-year anniversary compared to the 3-year anniversary, when you look around the community, how are things there?
I think we're doing extremely well. A few people have decided not to rebuild their homes, but most of them are rebuilt. 3 years later, there's only 2 homes I'm aware of where they're still negotiating with their insurance companies. The rest are concentrating now more on replanting their gardens, their lawns, planting trees, many of them having been donated by the town. A major issue is the forests. That's huge, and that will be a very long, slow process. It's an expensive process, but I ride around town regularly to see what's happened, and there's been a gradual, steady improvement throughout the entire 3 years of people getting contractors in there to help them clear things, and as you drive around, you'll see the difference of what's been cleared. And
Yeah. Have you done any comparison to see other communities, maybe not in Western Mass, I just mean in general, to see how long it typically takes to bounce back after a tornado? And have you done anything to see how Brimfield sort of stacks up?
I don't have any statistics, but our sense is that we are, if anything, ahead of others, and there's one main reason for that, and that's Gina Lynch. She's the director of our senior center, wife of the minister of the Congregational Church, and the senior center is located at the church. And she took on, the morning after the tornado, her volunteers were delivering breakfast to people in their homes, providing at church, providing breakfast for utility workers and so forth. And as the town government saw how things were going, they, every single department in town got on board with the blessing of the selectmen, so that we funneled all the requests we had through one central point. Requests for aid, she had people going out, assessing needs throughout the town, so she was right on top of it. And when I say that the church was involved and as a focal point, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that we had volunteers from practically every church in town.
That's very nice.
It wasn't just our church effort, it was a town-wide effort with all the churches helping, and many individuals who just walked in and said, what can I do?
Now, you were saying that, I think it was MEMA or FEMA walked in and sort of held your hand and told you exactly what you need to do. So what
Yes.
have you learned as far as emergency preparedness is concerned in your community? I guess if something were to happen right now, what are some things that you've learned that you'd be able to utilize?
Well, we've focused on a few things. One is communications. We've done a lot to improve our communications so that emergency management now has radios to be in contact with every department in town and with all the surrounding towns. We certainly found shelters are needed, and I've been fortunate to have Charlotte Corey as assistant director taking over shelter management.
Great.
So she does that. And just this year, we're just finishing up rewiring the generator for the shelter at the school, because we found that there were minor things. We didn't have any lights in the bathrooms that worked. Well, that doesn't become minor at times.
Right.
And we needed more outlets for recharging phones and so forth. So it's mostly preparedness.
Right.
It's learning things like that, communications, the practicalities of we have new cots and a portable 25-person portable shelter kit that it can move anywhere in town.
Sure, okay.
Is we need that, so that we've expanded our ability. If something would happen at the school, we can move somewhere else with some of our supplies.
Right.
We've done a lot with supplies, meals and so forth.
That's great. So it sounds like there has been a huge, this has been a huge, learning opportunity, and you have done a lot of preparing and equipment and shelters, as you're saying.
Yes.
That's really nice to hear. And you said that the trees are your sticking point right now. That's going to take. Are there any plans to? I mean, how do you really move that along? But you said
It's
that
very
that's really
difficult to move along because you start by saying, well, so many people burn wood, they need firewood. Well, I was going around town when our contractor was there, and watching his men, his employees, sharpen a chainsaw, take 2 cuts, and have to sharpen it again because of all the metal and other debris that was right in those trees from the tornado.
It's not just trees in there.
So it's not as simple a job as you might think. Oh, we'll cut this up and use it for firewood. Some of our several loads of debris that was cleared went to the power plant in New Hampshire,
Oh, okay.
but they're restricted from what they could take. So our contractor sells mulch, and he was able, part of the contract with him was he got the product.
Sure.
He does have a machine to take
Yeah.
metal out of it,
Right.
but still, it's not as usable as you might think it would be.
That's very interesting. Dick Morris, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us. It's so nice to hear about the progress in Brimfield. Of course, that was one of the communities we know was hit the hardest. And it's just nice to see the positive recovery efforts, things moving forward, and we hope it'll be even more to report at the 4-year anniversary. So thank you so much for being on. I do appreciate it. And the recovery continues 3 years after the tornado, as you just heard. After the break, we'll talk about the rebuilding effort in Springfield. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. Today's a 3-year anniversary of a tornado that swept across western Massachusetts. If you can believe it's been 3 years already. It left millions of dollars in damage and 3 people dead. Since that time, there have been a lot of redevelopment in the communities affected. There's also been a real effort by emergency management agencies to provide information to families and businesses about being prepared for natural disasters. Joining me now, we have Jay Minkara, President and CEO of Develop Springfield, to talk to us about Springfield. Thank you so much for being here. I do appreciate
thanks
it.
for having me.
We just spoke with Brimfield, and Springfield was, of course, another community hit very hard. A couple of different neighborhoods in Springfield is widespread there. Can you talk to me first about where you think we are on this anniversary? Talk to me about Develop Springfield and what you've had going on.
Well, we've had a lot of different things going on. I mean, kind of just backing up as to who we are. Develop Springfield is a nonprofit redevelopment corporation that is dedicated to stimulating revitalization and economic development in the city. So, of course, we existed before the tornado, but the tornado really galvanized things in so many ways. Right after the tornado, I think it was pretty widely recognized, given the extent of the devastation in the city, that we need a plan to guide us in our rebuild effort. It can't be haphazard. It has to be thoughtful. We have to really, I hate to use the word opportunity, but we want to come back and build a stronger, better community. So that was really the thinking. And so the mayor asked Develop Springfield to work with the Redevelopment Authority in leading the rebuild planning effort. So that continued until the spring of 2012. So while the kind of emergency recovery response, all of that was happening, we were in the process of really trying to be thoughtful as to how are we going to rebuild and how are we going to dedicate our resources. So that was actually an incredibly involved process, one of the best planning processes I think I've seen. Over 3,000 people participated in that process, and it grew into a citywide master plan. So that was really pretty exciting to see happen. So what that really allowed us to do is thoughtfully think about how to allocate resources, and it has to be done in different ways in different neighborhoods. I mean, you mentioned a number of neighborhoods were hit. I think the total was around 8 that were really, really impacted. But neighborhoods are different. Some neighborhoods were primarily made up of renters. We had, relatively high rates of poverty, and the circumstances in those neighborhoods and the needs were very different than ones that were mainly owner-occupied, single-family homes, people who had insurance. So we were thoughtful about it, and a lot of time went in also on the part of the city to make sure that Springfield got every dollar that was coming to it in terms of, FEMA dollars coming in, and in terms of things like Community Development Block Grant Disaster Relief Fund. So it was really quite something to see. What the mayor did is really pull together department heads and other key people like Develop Springfield to form a team, the tornado team, that really kind of addressed issues on multiple fronts. So you ask kind of where are we now? This isn't statistical in any way, but I see us as at a halfway point.
That's good.
It is good. Of course, a lot of individual homeowners, they had insurance. It was difficult. It was hard, but they rebuilt their homes. They've kind of pulled their lives back together. In many neighborhoods, one of the issues that has remained is trees. There were so many trees that were lost. So we've been able to help with replanting in many of those communities and work with some of the parks. Of course, that takes years.
Right.
For that to happen. So those, many of the businesses also were able to, come back. We were able to help some of them with some of the funds that we received. Some like, nonprofits like Square One, which were so impacted, the child care delivery service. And they have finally now reopened, which is wonderful to see in the South End on Main Street. But of course, some things take a whole lot more time. As you may know, Cathedral High School, was completely devastated, and they've only now reached settlement both with FEMA and with their insurance company. So some of these major projects, they've taken longer. South End Community Center is another one that is now finally going to get going. We're so pleased to see that happen. So that's why I want to say we're at a halfway point, because many people have brought back their homes and businesses, and a lot has happened. In fact, we just had on Thursday a event kind of commemorating the release of the plan and the tornado. We were on Central Street in Six Corners, which is one of the most devastated areas, where we're finally seeing new single-family homes are being built in that community. It's wonderful to see that progress.
Yeah.
So now I think what we're really looking forward to next is some of these really significant, larger public or things, in the case of Cathedral, the high schools, finally getting underway and coming back.
So what do you see as sort of the timeline? And obviously all projects are slightly different when we're talking about the school and the homes, but what do you sort of see as the timeline to, reach that point that you could sort of say, I think Springfield has really made a full recovery here now from the tornado. When do you sort of foresee that happening based on the number of people and the businesses and the schools that still have these needs? Is it another 3 years, you think, or?
I definitely do. With some of these larger projects, you are looking at about a 2.5, 3 year window before we're going to see completion. Of course, if you just imagine designing and then building a new high school, that's going to take time. Projects like the South End Community Center maybe a little sooner, but that's also significant. Of course, what's also on the horizon in Springfield is a potential for seeing the MGM Resort Casino built. That will be on an area that was very, very significantly devastated. In fact, what was a South End Community Center, the old Armory site, would be incorporated into that. So we do have areas where, potentially we're going to see major redevelopment projects. And again, that's probably going to be about a 3 year window. And related to it, we have a lot of areas that were impacted. They may now be vacant buildings or vacant lots kind of in that area in the South End, where there's kind of a wait and see mode. What's going to happen? Is the casino going to move forward? And that's going to be a driver. But 3 years is not an unreasonable window. Again, things like trees that take a long time, and people's lives and their memories. I mean, those are the kinds of things that take, of course, longer to heal. But I think you're going to see a very, very different looking Springfield in many areas in the next few years.
We were hearing from Dick that just a couple of people decided not to rebuild their homes. Did you have many people who made that decision in Springfield? I guess when you look at the neighborhoods, are they mostly all people who are doing work and coming back, or did you have a good majority of people abandon their properties? How did that end up?
I think it's really a mix. It depends on the areas. In some of our more disadvantaged communities, you saw more people making the choice not to rebuild. Those aren't all homeowners, of course. Oftentimes, those were people who owned investment property and simply chose, not to rebuild in those areas. So there's no question that happened. In our stronger neighborhoods, stronger is not quite the term I'd want to use, but neighborhoods where you see a whole lot more owner occupancy, you saw most people really committing to rebuild. But certainly there are people who make those choices, and they make those choices for a variety of reasons. Some people may decide, well, now's the time for me to retire and move to Florida, or now's the time to join my family somewhere else. So you saw those kinds of things happening. But oftentimes those have presented new opportunities for us. One of the things at Develop Springfield that we have looked to do is acquire some of those lots that are now vacant, and let's work with the city and private developers to try and get new homes built, which is exactly what you see happening. And some of the homes that are now being built are really quite something.
Well, it sounds like you have a lot on your plate, but it is so good to hear that you have made so much progress, and there are so many plans in the works. It sounds like there is a lot going on. There's a lot coming up. Jay Mancaro, Develop Springfield, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us. I appreciate it, and good luck to you. I know that the next few years will, of course, continue to be very busy as we continue to rebuild after the tornado. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And here's a question: are you prepared for a disaster? We'll talk with an emergency preparedness director after this. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. In the wake of the tornado and months later, a hurricane and major snowstorm pulled through, and it leaves you wondering what people are doing to be better prepared for those types of emergencies and even possibly life-changing events. So joining us now to talk all about emergency preparedness, we have Bob Hassett, the Director of Emergency Preparedness for the City of Springfield. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to come and talk to people, Laura.
Yeah, it's nice to have you on. You know, a lot of people wonder if they're prepared, if they would be able to handle some kind of a disaster. We've had a lot happen, and we were just discussing off air about the tornado pulling through, and then many storms caused you to open emergency shelters that you said hadn't been opened in years. Talk to us about what the last couple of years have been like for you, first of all.
We've seen a lot, but I think Springfield's become a lot stronger. One of the things we've seen is, as terrible as those things were, the hurricanes, the tornado, the big snowstorms, the gas explosion, people have raised their awareness, one, to paying attention to what's going around them. And I think the media has stepped up to the plate also to help people be informed about what's going on. So one of the things we're encouraging people to do, and we've seen a great resurgence in this, is people are starting to prepare not only as individuals, but as families, and also we've seen it in business and industry around Springfield. People are starting to take this very seriously because they know it can happen here, because it has happened here. So one of the first things we do is ask people to be aware. You know, pay attention to what's going on, watch the weather report, see what's going to happen in your day. And if there's any long-term forecasts, like maybe a hurricane coming our way, you know, it's been since 1938 since we've had a Category 4 hurricane come through western Massachusetts. It's been since 1955 since we've had a hurricane Category 3 storm come through the area. So it can happen here. Every year in western Mass, we have a 24% chance of getting a large storm, like a hurricane, and they have a history of coming up through the Connecticut River Valley. So we have to keep looking over what's going on all the time. So not only do we want to be aware, but we want to be specifically aware of what's going on. The next thing we want to do is make a plan. Make a plan with our family, make a plan with our business. One of the things we're encouraging businesses to do is make sure that your employees are prepared, especially in critical facilities like hospitals and nursing homes, because in order for those folks to do their job and come in, and we can't do without them, they can't be worrying about their families. Is their family prepared? So in order to do that, especially for police and fire, EMS responders, we can't look over our shoulder and have the opportunity to worry about our families. We have to know that's done. So we want to make a family plan, and part of that is a family communications plan. How do we know that our loved ones are safe? So you can do that by discussing that with your family. Maybe sometimes you can't call during the disaster because the cell phone towers are out, but sometimes you can make an out-of-town call. So like with my family, we have an out-of-town location that we can call. And so you can call there and say, oh yes, your wife and daughter checked in and they're okay. Well, that helps me do my job better because I can focus on that and not worry about it.
That's interesting. Now, what kind of out-of-town center would you be calling? Just
a friend or a family.
Okay.
So we could call my father-in-law in Pennsylvania, or maybe a friend in Berkshire County, just out of town, where they are not having a problem.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So you want to carry those numbers around your wallet, discuss it with the family, and make sure you can do that, just so you can have that peace of mind when something bad happens. The next thing we want to do is have family meeting places. What if the disaster is such that you can't get back to your neighborhood, you can't get back home? So we recommend that you have a local meeting place, one in your neighborhood, one outside your neighborhood, that if all else fails, you have a spot to meet up. Maybe it's a corner of a parking lot at your church, or maybe at the mall somewhere else. And at least, you know, if all else fails, you can meet up with them there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, the next thing is I was going to talk about is outside the house is also an important meeting place. Unfortunately, fires are very frequent in our area, and we've seen tragedy after tragedy. And one of the things we want to make sure when the fire department arrives is that everybody's out safely. So if you have a common meeting place outside the house where you can count noses and make sure everybody got okay, that's one of the things we're looking for. The other thing is, you know, how many times have the firemen are going to go in and responders are going to go in and try to get you if something happens. If they know everybody's out okay, that takes care of that. And people aren't going to risk their lives unnecessarily to do that.
Sure, of course. Now, I understand not one plan fits all, because there are a number of different disasters. And of course, we'd never really been quite ready for a tornado, you know, because a tornado just didn't seem like it happens in Massachusetts. So many people were like, there's no way this tornado is actually going to happen, and then it did. Do you think that there needs to be specific plans for specific disasters? I know you're talking about the fires and everything, but have you talked to more people about, you know, what if these sort of rare occurrences actually end up happening here?
When we go to talk to businesses and families, we talked about two options that they have. One is they can shelter in place. So let's say it's a terrible windstorm or even a tornado. Obviously, we want them to shelter in place either in their basement or in a central part of the house. It could be a hazardous materials incident where there isn't time to evacuate. You may want to shelter in your place in a place in the center of the house, turning off the heating and air conditioning system from bringing air from the outside in, and stay there until you're rescued. The other option is evacuation. So let's say you lived in a mobile home. Mobile homes don't do very well in windstorms, and so you should have a place planned with you or your family to go that's safer. So it might be to a friend's house, might be to church, might be to a local building that's a lot stronger than your own.
Yeah, you know, that makes a good point. Of course, when this tornado happened, many people were on the bridge in West Springfield, heading over to Springfield, or vice versa. But it begs the question of, are you safer in your car when things happen, or is it best to run to businesses nearby?
It's best to get out of your car during a tornado.
Okay. And what about, you know, in just major hurricane-type situations? I mean, do you always suggest people leave their cars?
We don't want you to be on the road, because after 45 miles an hour it becomes unsafe to drive because of the high winds. There also might be high-profile vehicles on the road, and they can get blown around and hit your car. So when there is a big storm like that, a high wind event, we recommend you stay off the road and stay out of your car. Seek shelter in a sturdy building. And
what about just having materials in place at your home? Have you talked to people about flashlights, and are there things that you should just have stacked away in your house anyway? There's two places where you should build a kit. Okay. One is in your home, and we recommend you have enough for you and your family to survive for 3 to 5 days. That includes foods, water, clothing, and what we recommend is that you change the clothing and components. When we change the clocks in the spring and fall, go ahead and look at that. And so for like a winter kit, you're probably going to have your coats and things like that, but the things everybody forgets are mittens, extra socks, extra hats, things like that. So you might want to change those things out, maybe higher energy foods, maybe specialized foods if anybody has a special diet. Look out for medicines, and if you work with your insurance company and your physician, you can plan for those medicines. The kits are expensive. It's expensive to put together a kit for a family of 4. So what we recommend is you buy it a little bit at a time, and then kind of if you need some, let's say you need some crackers during the week or something, you can go down to the kit, grab the crackers, and just put that on your shopping list. So it would be expensive to build over time, but if you buy it a little bit at a time, it's a lot better. Such good advice. Bob Hassett, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about this. I do appreciate it. The kits and what to do if you're out and things happen. It's also important, and thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about it. You're welcome. Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you. And we'll have the last word for you after the break. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Today we discussed the cuts at Westover and the repercussions of those changes for our region. We also talked about the continued recovery efforts of today's 3-year anniversary of a tornado that left a path of destruction. took lives and caused millions of dollars in property damage. It was a day to remember for us here in Western Mass, and we felt it was important to highlight how far we've come and what still needs to be done. That is our program for today. We want to thank all of our guests for joining us. Thank you at home for watching. From all of us here at 22 News, we wish you a wonderful Sunday.